My in-laws demand we sacrifice everything, wanting us to move in so they can claim our baby, but I refuse to surrender. I'm a 30-year-old woman, married to my wonderful 31-year-old husband for almost 3 years. We have a little boy, just 8 months old. Our marriage was arranged, but I genuinely struck gold. My husband has always been incredibly kind, supportive, and understanding. My husband is the oldest of 3 sons, and his 2 younger brothers both live abroad. My in-laws, who never had a daughter of their own, have treated me with an abundance of warmth from the very beginning. They really are good people, which only makes all of this so much harder for me. The issues began after our son was born. In the early months postpartum, I stayed with my parents for a while and then with my in-laws. At first, I brushed off the little things, figuring they were just excited new grandparents. But things started piling up. They began referring to themselves as father and mother when talking to my baby, in our native language. When my son needed comfort, my father-in-law would call for my mother-in-law to soothe him, instead of letting me do it myself. Sometimes they wouldn't even hand him over when he was crying, or they'd take him out of my arms because they wanted to be the ones to calm him down. I started to feel invisible in my own baby's life, but kept telling myself maybe it was just the roller coaster of postpartum hormones. It really ramped up after we moved to the city where my husband works. Now, we video call my in-laws every day, and it's always the same. If my baby fusses, my Phil sighs, our baby is sad because he misses us, or claims he's all alone there, despite being surrounded by his actual parents. He's even joked that our baby must be bored seeing only our faces all day. It's as though, in their minds, my baby is more theirs than ours, and we're just caretakers. They relentlessly insist that my son only looks like their side of the family, dismissing any resemblance to me, even when it's blatantly obvious. My husband saw all this too, and admitted it grated on him. He even corrected his father once, but nothing changed. Eventually I started speaking up, correcting my Phil every time he called himself dad, and, finally, he stopped. Both times they visited us since we moved, I found myself on edge, exhausted by the endless boundary crossing and criticisms of our parenting. Then came the big conflict. Visits to our hometown are hard. My husband only gets 4 days off a month, and it's simply not possible to go often. Now my in-laws want us to drop everything, quit our jobs, and move permanently into their home so they can be close to the baby. I work from home, but only from our current city, not my hometown. And honestly, after what we've experienced, I just don't feel comfortable living in their home. I can already foresee them taking over, denying us the opportunity to raise our son as we choose. My Phil criticizes us relentlessly, saying we don't feed the baby on time, that he's unhappy or lonely, and that he has to play alone. I had to tell my husband, I don't feel comfortable living with them, and I fear they'd never let us truly parent our child on our own terms. My husband agrees with me. He's planning to have a serious talk with his father and finally put up the boundaries we so desperately need, to make it unequivocally clear, this is our child, not theirs. Of course, I worry too. My husband feels torn because if we stay away, his parents will be alone, his brothers are far away. Other than these issues, they really have been good to me, and I don't want to shatter the relationship. But at the end of the day, I have to ask, am I wrong for refusing to move in and for insisting on setting these boundaries around my baby, even if it risks hurting their feelings? After everything, and after discussing it at length with my husband, it's never been clearer, the well-being of our little family has to come first. Their loneliness may tug at my heart, but it is not my burden to bear. If they wish to be closer to their grandchild, they can always move nearer to us. If they want to be involved, then our rules must be followed, period. None of this should require us to sacrifice our jobs, our independence, or our child's happiness. If we moved in, we'd be at their mercy, completely, and that's a situation I refuse to walk into. Update 1. After a recent visit from my father-in-law, I felt compelled to reflect on everything that unfolded. It reinforced every concern that had been gnawing at me. Before the visit, I had specifically asked my husband to remind his father to wash his hands before holding our baby. This isn't new. Hand washing has been a point of tension in the past. Despite the clear reminder, the moment he walked in, my father-in-law took my baby straight from my arms. No hand washing, no hesitation. My husband had to repeat the request multiple times before he finally complied, and even then, it was with obvious reluctance. All throughout the visit, there were these backhanded remarks about our baby being happy now that everyone is here, as if my child is somehow all alone when it's just my husband and me. It's subtle but stings every time. Then came another familiar scenario. My father-in-law stubbornly refused to acknowledge any of our son's resemblance to me, not even something obvious like the hair. My husband and others pointed it out, yet my father-in-law just doubled down, and what should have been a trivial observation devolved into a needless argument. I felt so dismissed, so unacknowledged in my own home. Later that evening, as alcohol started flowing in the living room, I grew uneasy about our baby being around it. Rather than make a scene in front of guests, I quietly took my baby into the bedroom with me. That's when I overheard my father-in-law make an offhand joke about putting a few drops of alcohol in our 8-month-old's mouth so he could get a taste early. He insisted that everyone in the family drinks anyway, like it was some badge of honor. My husband and I shut it down before he could finish. My husband, being a doctor, addressed him firmly, explaining exactly why it was dangerous and unacceptable. My father-in-law brushed us off, saying it was costly whiskey, nothing would happen, and that he'd been given alcohol as a child himself. Supposedly, that was all for gut health. I was furious, intent aside, that crossed an unambiguous line. That wasn't all, there were other, smaller boundary pushes throughout their stay, each one eroding my patience further. We didn't confront my father-in-law directly at that point because my mother-in-law wasn't there, and he was visiting with his brothers and sons. It just seemed better to wait and address everything face to face, privately and soberly, rather than in front of extended family or while tempers flared. When they finally left, I looked at my husband and told him I could never be comfortable living in the same house as his parents. If we were to move closer in the future, it'd have to be in a completely separate home. He agreed, there was no hesitation. That visit made it clear, my discomfort wasn't just about minor slights or hurt feelings, it was a matter of repeated boundary violations, real concerns for our child's safety, and being undermined in our roles as parents. My husband and I are on the same page, and will be setting firm, unwavering boundaries from now on. Update 2. We finally sat down for a real conversation with my in-laws, and I want to share exactly how it played out. It started with my mother-in-law. She called us over FaceTime and took the lead, wanting to hear us out first. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I explained just how hurt my husband and I have been by certain comments and behaviors, especially from my father-in-law, and made it clear how much those moments made us feel as if our role as parents wasn't being respected. I laid out the boundaries that had been crossed, and dug into why it struck such a nerve for us, how deeply it affected our sense of security as a family. To her credit, my Mill didn't interrupt or try to defend herself. She listened the whole way through, genuinely acknowledged our feelings, and gave us a heartfelt apology. She didn't beat around the bush, she told us straight that we are the parents, that no one else, not even the grandparents, has the right to make us feel otherwise. She then brought my Phil onto the call and basically recounted everything we'd discussed, right in front of us. My Phil apologized too, insisting he never meant to hurt us. Both of them promised not to repeat the behaviors or comments we'd talked about. We didn't leave it at that. I brought up the bigger issues, like our living arrangements and what the future might look like. I told them we aren't going to move in with them. We have our own life and plan to keep building it where we are now. It's what's best for both of our careers and our family's happiness. I stressed that if they ever needed help, we'd be there for them, but our boundaries, especially when it comes to our child, are non-negotiable. They can come visit and spend time with our baby, but our role as parents comes first, and visits will always happen while we're present. Of course, we'll still visit them for the holidays and important times. They didn't resist, both assured us they would respect our decisions moving forward, and the conversation genuinely felt like a turning point. My husband and I are totally on the same page. Yes, we know this isn't the end and upholding boundaries takes ongoing effort, but that call was a significant step in the right direction. Deep down, both of us are still a bit skeptical. We know apologies and words only mean so much, so we're keeping our eyes open and making sure boundaries remain firm. But for now, I'm relieved. This was the start we needed to rebuild respect and move forward as a family, on our own terms. Update 3. After that call, we decided to test what changed behavior would look like in real life. We invited my in-laws for a short weekend visit with clear expectations, hand-washing, asking before picking up the baby, and no unsolicited remedies. They showed up soft-spoken and careful, and for a few hours it actually felt good. My Mill asked before taking him, my Phil washed his hands the first time without a reminder, and they called us by our names when talking to the baby. I let my guard down a little. I shouldn't have. During the second day, my Mill offered to rock him for a nap while I made lunch. I hovered between the kitchen and the bedroom, peeking in, listening for his little sighs. When I went in to swap his bib, I smelled something sweet. Sticky, faint, not milk. My Mill avoided my eyes, said, a little ghee for his throat. It wasn't ghee. I tasted the corner of the bib and my stomach dropped. Honey? I asked her directly, and she admitted it like a child confessing a mischief. Just a tiny smear, something her mother did for immunity, nothing to worry about. I could feel my hands shaking. My husband came in, saw my face, and for the first time in our marriage I watched him lose his temper. He didn't shout, but his voice went hard in a way I've never heard. He reminded her that we had talked about this exact thing. He reminded her our son isn't even a year old. He was the one who picked up the phone to call our pediatrician while my Mill cried and my Phil stood at the doorway trapped between stubbornness and embarrassment. The doctor was calm and factual. Monitor closely for the next 48 hours. Watch for symptoms. Bring him in immediately if anything was off. Those 2 days felt like holding my breath underwater. Our son was fine, but the trust was not. My Mill tried to apologize again, insisting she didn't mean harm, that she'd given honey to all her nephews and nieces for years. I told her intention didn't erase risk, that we had asked for one thing and she had done the opposite the moment my back was turned. When they left, my husband sent a message making it explicit. Visits paused, no exceptions, until we could talk again and until they understood that no isn't a discussion topic. 3 days later, before we had even decided how to proceed, my Mill texted that they had good news. A video followed, a sunlit balcony, a view I recognized, the name of a building 2 blocks from ours. We took a flat here. Surprise. She was elated. She said now they could help every day, They could be there in a minute if we were tired, no more distance, no more missing milestones. They had signed the lease and paid the deposit before telling us. My husband stared at his phone like it belonged to someone else. He called them immediately and told them plainly, moving was their choice, not a promise of access. He laid it out in simple words: no unannounced drop-ins, no keys to our place, no taking the baby out for a quick walk, no home remedies, ever. Visits would be scheduled. If they broke a boundary again, we would pull back, again. They moved in last weekend. On their first evening, they tried to show up with Atali and Prasad just to bless the house and baby. My husband met them at the door, thanked them, and told them to come back at the time we'd agreed to the next day. They looked startled, hurt, even, but they left without pushing. The next day they arrived on time. My Phil washed his hands without being prompted. My Mill asked before picking him up. When she went to adjust his bib and reach for his mouth, I saw her catch herself, pull her hand back, and look at me first. I said no. She nodded. This isn't warm and fuzzy. It is controlled, sometimes awkward, always deliberate. But there was a moment after the visit, when I was putting our son to sleep, where I felt something I haven't felt around them in months: quiet. No one else reaching for him over my shoulder. No whispers about what he really needs, just the three of us, exactly where we're supposed to be. We've told the building security not to let anyone up without us confirming. We've put the chain on the door. We've made it clear that we're downstairs isn't an emergency and that our calendars aren't open by default because they happen to live close by. They can have their new apartment, their new routines, their new neighborhood walks. We will have our family, on our terms. I don't know what they tell themselves about the honey or about the lease they signed in secret. I do know they looked at my husband with something that resembled respect when he held the line. That matters. The first birthday is coming up and they've already started hinting at the kind of celebration they want. We'll do what we planned: small, local, ours. If they want to be there, they'll come as grandparents who understand whose child this is. If not, we'll blow out a candle with a baby who laughs hardest in our arms, and sleep that night without bracing for the next boundary to be crossed. Update 4. The week before his birthday felt like holding two plans in each hand and trying not to let them touch. We had our plan: small, morning, the park with the banyan where he likes to point at leaves and laugh, a cake he can smash without food dyes, 2 friends with toddlers who nap when he does. My in-laws had what they kept calling just blessings. A priest, a small heaven, a tiny touch of tradition. Every time they said tiny, I pictured the honey on his bib. We said no. Over and over, gently at first and then in plain words. No rituals. No shaving. No feeding. No exceptions. On the morning of his birthday, the doorbell rang 40 minutes early. I had balloons still in a drawer and a baby in pajamas. My husband checked the peephole. 2 men stood there with a cloth bag, a small wooden stool, a bottle of oil. One of them had a hand mirror tucked under his arm. Munden K. Lie Ia Hain, he said when my husband opened the door a crack. Baby cow haircut. Pandit G. Nibolatha. I felt the floor go cold. My husband closed the door, took a breath, called his mother. Chanting in the background made everything inside me want to shout. He didn't. Cancel it, he said, level. We are not bringing him. You do anything you want in your home, but our son is not part of it. There was a flurry of explanations. It's only a lock of hair, it's auspicious on his first birthday, we already told everyone. He didn't move. He told the men outside they had the wrong address and pressed money into their hands for the time they'd wasted. He told them not to take another booking from our flat again. He called security and added another line to the instructions: no barbers, no priests, no vendors, ever, unless one of us comes down. We could hear the heaven bell from the balcony. Smoke lifted, thin and stubborn, from their side of the building. My mill texted 10 times that hour, photos of marigolds on brass, a deer reflected in silver, emojis that felt like pleading. I didn't answer. I zipped my son into a clean shirt with bright boats on it. He tried to eat the zipper and then gnawed his teeth like it had wronged him. He was happy. He was ours. The park was the thing it always is, quiet and uneven, a little dusty, full of small, observant dogs that come up to sniff your ankles and then pretend they meant to go somewhere else. Our friends brought paper hats that refused to stay on anyone's head. We took exactly 4 photos before he rubbed cake into his own hair and grinned like he'd invented joy. There were no speeches. He took 5 deliberate steps between my hands and my husband's knees and collapsed in both, cackling. The world tilted toward us. I forgot about bells. My in-laws came later, at the time we had set. They were dressed like they were going to a temple, subdued and precise. My Phil washed his hands without a look in our direction. My Mill stood in the doorway and asked, "Can we give Tika?" She held out a tiny pinch of kumkum, a cotton bud, her eyes searching my face. I told her no. She nodded, put it back in her bag, and asked if she could tie a black thread around his ankle for Nazar. My husband said, "Ask us again when he's older." She tucked the thread away. She didn't reach for his mouth. They tried to give him a gold chain, small and heart-stoppingly shiny, engraved with his name in a script I can't read without thinking of my own grandmother. For later, she said, placing it flat on our table like an offering she had already accepted would not be worn today. I said, "Thank you. We will keep it safe." My Phil started to say, if we had known you wouldn't do the mundane. And my husband cut in, not unkind, you did know. There was one sticky moment. My Mill's cousin and his wife turned up at their place and, finding a baby less having, wandered over to just wish. They hovered in our doorway, sandals in hand, trying to make themselves small. I don't have the energy to host people who arrive on the back of someone else's assumptions. My husband told them we weren't receiving extra guests and that we'd see them another time. They looked relieved to be given a reason to leave. My Mill looked like she wanted the ground to fold her in. I didn't gloat. I handed her a napkin and asked if she wanted to hold him while I wiped cake off his ear. She asked. I said yes. She kept her hands away from his face. We blew out a single candle. He was more interested in the flame than the wish. My Phil clapped at the wrong moment and laughed at himself. For a second, it was normal, the part of family where everyone is a little silly and no one is trying to be in charge. Then my phone buzzed with a message from security, a photo of a priest in saffron at the lobby asking for our floor. He's been sent back, the guard wrote. Do you want us to keep a note? I wrote back, yes. Permanently. I showed my husband. He shook his head once, then lifted our son high enough to make him squeal. After they left, my Mill sent a single text, we wanted to do it the right way. We did our having for his health. No cutting. We won't ask again. It landed in my chest and sat there, heavy and complicated. They did what they needed to soothe their community and their sense of order. We did what we needed to protect our child. The two can exist in the same city without touching. I put my son to sleep with cake still sugar scented in his hair. He burrowed into my shoulder the way he always does when he's completely done with the day, no space left for anyone else's plans. My husband washed the last icing smear off a plate and leaned in the doorway, the chain on our door catching the hall light like a small, stubborn line. We are still here. The three of us. Midway between someone else's rituals and our own rules, choosing, every time, what keeps our world quiet. Update 5. We did the thing I had been putting off because it felt like admitting we couldn't do everything at once. We put his name down for a tiny morning program, 2 days a week, 3 hours, a room with low shelves and fat crayons and a teacher who crouches to be at eye level. Not to outsource our baby. To give all of us a little more air. The first drop-off was noisy in the gentlest way, paper mobiles that looked like tangled fish, a shoe cubby with his name spelled in foam letters, a boy in dinosaur, pajamas showing off a sticker like it was a moon rock. My son stared, serious, then delighted. I kept my hand still and my voice steady and walked out with my heart tapping my ribs like a moth at a window. On the second week, on a festival morning where the building smelled faintly of fried sweets and cardamom, my phone lit up with the center's number. The administrator's voice was polite enough that my stomach knew before she finished. There's a guest here who says she's grandmother. She brought prasad. She wants to give him a taste for blessings. Should we? I could hear the corridor echo behind her, the tiny coat hooks singing when someone brushed past. I told her to follow her policy. Parents only. No food. No visitors. My Mill texted, then called, then texted again. It's just a tiny spoon. Hand it, G said to make sure. Why are you making me feel like a thief? I put my phone face down and watched the clock. When I picked him up, he ran into my knees, a paint smudge at his temple shaped like a comma. The teacher smiled like nothing dramatic had happened. On the way home, I called my husband. He called his mother. You'll never do that again, he said, in the voice he uses for difficult family news at the hospital, calm like a wall. If you show up uninvited at his school, you won't see him for a while. She cried. He didn't soften. When he came home, his shoulders finally dropped and he sat on our floor with our son and built a tower of blocks that collapsed exactly 3 times to make our child gasp with exaggerated shock. We made doll and didn't talk much. That night, I left a note with security, only we pick up, no exceptions. A new code word, changed monthly. The next morning my Mill sent a message asking what the word was. I typed, slowly, we'll tell the staff. You don't need it. She didn't reply. It felt like a small door I had closed gently before anyone tried to walk through it. 2 days later, life picked its own moment to be loud. The lift dinged and then there was a sound that wasn't right, metal, a shoe scuff, a soft curse that broke in the middle. By the time I opened our door, my Phil was sitting on the floor of the corridor with one hand pressed flat to the wall like he could hold himself up with paint. His face had gone the color of the hallway lighting. My husband was out of his shoes and on the ground with him in 3 seconds, fingers at the pulse point he knows better than our grocery list. I put our son in the carrier so I had both arms free and brought water and a towel and the blood pressure cuff my husband insists on owning like other men insist on screwdrivers. Numbers I've learned to respect flashed. My Phil tried to joke and couldn't make the effort. We went with them to the hospital because there was no other version. The emergency department at night has its own weather, too bright and too cold, the plastic of chairs squeaking under people who are trying to be brave. My husband switched between son and doctor like he was built with a hidden gear. He spoke to the cardiology resident, and then to his mother, and at some point he looked at me over our baby's sleeping head and managed a smile that was more relief than anything else. It wasn't a cardiac event. It was a spike and a slip, blood pressure and blood sugar and a day without enough water and more stress than either of them will ever admit out loud. The discharge papers said all the sensible things. The real prescription was humility, routine, and fewer surprises. We took them home in a taxi that smelled faintly of lemon polish and yesterday's rain. I put a thermos of soup, a banana, and the spare device charger on their table. My Mill's hand shook when she picked up her keys. "Thank you," she whispered to the floor. I said goodnight without adding anything that would turn that into a scene. In the morning she sent a message that surprised me. "Give us your timings. We will follow." No more appearing. I sent 2 windows that worked for us that week and nothing else. At 5:03 they rang the bell. They didn't bring food. They didn't wear the look that says they're here to sneak something past us. My Phil sat in our low chair like it might exhale under him, one hand on his knee, and let our son stack rings on his shoe. My Mill sat on the rug and rolled a rubber ball back and forth, asking every time, "Can I take him for a walk in the corridor?" And accepting "not today," like it was a line from a play whose script she had finally read. I won't tell you we've turned some perfect corner. There was a package that arrived 2 mornings later, a walker with shamelessly loud music buttons and a plastic tray shaped like a steering wheel. The kind that makes pediatricians sigh and my husband roll his eyes so far back I can see the school loans he still owes. I sliced the tape open, scanned the instructions, and taped it shut again. "We don't use walkers," I wrote back. "We'll return it. Thank you for thinking of him." She didn't argue. She sent a screenshot of the return label and a thumbs up, which is not her language and felt like effort. We decided to let them sit in on one pediatrician visit, only to sit. No talking over us. No negotiating vaccines with 7 stories about someone's neighbor's cousin. My Mill wore her good sari, which always makes me feel like I didn't get the dress code, and clutched her handbag with both hands like the room might take it from her. When the doctor asked about sleep and appetites and new words, my husband answered, and I answered, and they listened. My Phil took the injection like it was happening to him. I squeezed, hand squeezing his knee in sympathy, and afterward he said, quietly, "You are doing well," and met me, which landed in a place I didn't know was waiting. The building threw a tiny holy in the courtyard, no water, just dry colors and an auntie with a harmonium who refuses to retire. We took him down in an old white onesie we were willing to sacrifice. My in-laws were already there, both wearing gray like they had thought through how not to look like a season. My Mill stood back, palms out. "Can I touch a little color to his wrist?" she asked, voice not quite steady. "On the sleeve." I said yes, to the sleeve, and she dabbed the faintest pink circle on cotton and then wiped her fingers on her own dupatta before she lifted him. He laughed at the music like it was a practical joke we were all in on. My Phil took a photo from a respectful distance and didn't send it to 20 relatives in front of us. Later my phone pinged with one picture and a caption that just said, "Beautiful day." There is still a part of me that sits up when the intercom buzzes like a dog that heard thunder 3 storms ago and never forgot. The chain still catches the hallway light like a small warning. But last night, when I put our son down, he reached for my shirt and then for his father's ear, his 2 favorite handles on the world, and curled in with a sigh that tells me there is nothing unfinished in him at that moment. Across the courtyard, their balcony was dark before ours for the first time since they moved here. The building breathed. I stood there and watched the city be itself, horns far away, a scooter's petulant whine, the elevator's tired cables talking to themselves, and I thought, this is what it looks like when everyone learns their own door. Not an explosion. Not a victory, just a stubborn, ordinary kind of peace that has to be chosen again in the morning. Update 6. The rain came back like a rumor, thin, sticky, not quite committed, and our living room smelled like damp books and the orange peel I'd left on the counter to make the place feel less like a hospital corridor. Our son was busy with plastic cups, stacking them and then unstacking them like it was a moral philosophy. My in-laws arrived exactly on the minute we'd given them, shoes side by side like they were trying to behave even at the doorstep. My Mill held a brown box to her chest the way someone carries a cat that isn't sure about you yet. "A little something," she said, soft, like maybe if she spoke gently the box would be less of a question. "We don't do unboxing in front of anyone anymore if we can help it, but this one was small enough that pretending would have been its own performance," she said, "for when you rest," and gave me a look I've learned to hate, concern shaped like permission. Inside was a pale plastic bear with a sleepy face and a round belly. A nightlight, I thought. The kind that size colors. I plugged it into the socket by the low shelf because there didn't seem to be a reason not to, and a tiny green dot lit up under its right ear. Not cozy. Watchful. My phone buzzed. New device connected. The name made my mouth go dry. CloudCam_babyangel. My husband was across the room before I could say anything, already pulling up the router app, his thumb moving with the kind of focus he uses in the hospital when someone's numbers start to tell a story he doesn't like. It was broadcasting to an email I recognized immediately, her first name and the year she was born, a simple, neat thing she uses for everything. The bear's belly had a lens so small you wouldn't notice it unless you were looking for it. Now that I was looking, I could feel it looking back. He unplugged it without making a sound. The room changed shape. My Mill started to explain before we asked. "It's just a baby monitor. Everyone uses. My cousin's daughter shares her login with us. If the baby stirs, we call, we go help. See, we can also talk through this one." She tapped the bear's nose and it beeped, an eager trick. "We're not everyone," my husband said, steady. "You don't get a live feed into our home," He picked up the box, took out the instruction leaflet with the pre-written Wi-Fi name and the tiny QR code, and slipped them back in like he was tucking someone back under a blanket. We didn't ask for this. My Mill's mouth trembled into a shape I know, a mixture of pride and hurt and the reflex to tell on herself as a way to make you forgive her. We only thought, when you nap, if he cries. My Phil stood very still and stared at his shoes like maybe the floor would give him a script. I wanted to be cruel and I didn't want to be cruel, both at once. I kept my voice ordinary. We call you when we want you. You can call us when you want to see him. That's it. No camera. No microphones. No devices that watch him for anyone else. My husband carried the bear back to the door and held it out. Take it, he said. Please don't bring anything with a lens into this house again. She took it like it might shatter, held it against her ribs the way she had when she walked in, and didn't meet my eyes. You'd think that would be the end, or at least the loudest part. But in the quiet that followed, our son thumping a cup on the floor with the moral certainty of a drummer who knows exactly where to put the beat, other things rearranged themselves too. My Mill didn't linger the way she usually does in the nursery doorway. She sat on the rug where I could see her hands. She asked, "Can I roll the ball to him? And then, can I take a photo?" And when I said, "One, and don't post," she nodded and held the phone down near her lap like the picture might escape if she let it climb. That night we changed the Wi-Fi password and the network name and the thing most people can't be bothered to change because it's too boring. We didn't make an announcement. I watched the little lights on the router breathe in their slow city rhythm and felt my shoulders drop in a way I hadn't realized they were still holding themselves up. The next morning the program sent a note home, printed with a cartoon elephant and a smear of blue where someone had tried to wipe off a fingerprint. Grandfriend's Day, they called it. Bring someone older you love. I read it twice and then held it out to my husband. We looked at each other over our son's head while he tried to eat the paper. We would let them come, together, with us. We would not let it turn into a ceremony. I told them the date and the time and that they could bring themselves and nothing else. My Mill said only, "Okay," and sent a photo from their kitchen of 2 spoons on a clean counter, as if to say, "See, we are making the effort even in the small corners." Between those things, bear in a box back in their house, a school day with a polite invitation, we had an hour that turned into a test we didn't plan. Security called. A delivery with our flat number, no name. It happens all the time. My husband asked them to open it downstairs. The guard sent a photo, a box of Guy Ledoux's, the label from a sweet shop that makes everything look like an occasion. For blessing, the note said, the edges still curled from the pen. I could see my Mill's handwriting trying to be careful. We told them to send it back. 10 minutes later my phone rang. My Mill's voice was small. "Not even to keep for you later? Not even for later." She wanted to argue, and she didn't. In the afternoon she came by empty-handed and sat where she had sat yesterday and asked if she could borrow a glass of water from me like it mattered that it came from our kitchen and not hers. At Grandfriend's Day, the room smelled like crayons and the faint, honest scent of other people's children. The teacher had set out clay and fat brushes and reserved 1 chair for each child and their +1. My Mill wore a starched cotton sari that made her seem like a paper folding trick, a crane that could open and close without creasing. My Phil perched on the edge of a tiny stool like a man who knows his knees are in negotiation. They did not bring anything. They did not ask to feed him. When he tried to high-five a cup of water and tipped it into his lap, my Mill looked at me first and then laughed with him like the wetness was a punchline we all knew. My Phil took one photo of my son painting a line directly onto his own wrist. He showed it to me without pressing send. "Just for us," he said, and there was no performance in it. We were almost home free when the school's WhatsApp pinged as we were strapping him into his stroller. Someone had posted a live video from the classroom, a sweep of the room, children, grandparents, teachers. My stomach jumped. I looked for our son's face. He was there for a second, then behind someone's shoulder, then a pink smear of paint on a sleeve. My Mill, to her credit, had not posted it. But it took only 3 minutes for a cousin I don't know to send me a link with 3 heart emojis. I wrote to the admin, the gentlest sentence I could manage that still felt like a wall: "Please no videos with children's faces." They apologized immediately and took it down. I added a note to our file. "Parents only when it comes to publishing him anywhere." My Mill's phone buzzed in her bag. She took it out, looked at it, and put it face down without even unlocking it. On the way home my husband said, "We have to be the boring ones every time," and it sounded less like a complaint than a plan. In the evening, a courier knocked. This time, our names were printed clearly. Inside, a digital photo frame, no camera, just a simple thing that only plays what you load into it. There was a note in my Phil's careful block letters: "Put only what you like. We will look when you let us." I sat on the floor with it and loaded exactly 6 photos: egg yolk sun on his cheeks at the park, cake in his hair, the 5 steps that weren't in focus and therefore perfect, the tiny pink finger circle on a sleeve, his mouth in an O at the sight of a dog that wanted none of us. I carried it over at our next window and plugged it in on their sideboard next to a brass bowl that always looks polished even on days they've given up. My Mill cried, but quietly, the way you cry when someone has listened to the part of you that didn't know how to speak without breaking the other parts. We didn't talk about the bear again. We didn't need to. The rule had absorbed into the walls the way cooking smells do, there without being pointed at. That night, after our son fell asleep with his feet in two opposite directions as if covering more ground in his dreams, I stood at the balcony and watched the rain finally come in. The chain on the door caught the hallway light. The router hummed its domestic, unglamorous lullaby. Across the way, their window glowed and blinked, a slow scroll of our photos, nothing moving except what we had already decided to share. It felt like the opposite of surveillance. It felt like permission, given by us, kept by them, fragile but real. We are not done. I don't think we will ever be done. But when my phone buzzed at 10 the next morning with a message from my mill, one line that said, "Can we come at 5:30 or tomorrow?" I answered, "Tomorrow," and watched the typing dots appear and disappear and then a simple, "Okay," arrive like a small, ordinary gift.